Welcome on into Forward Progress, presented by Fanduel Sportsbook. I'm your host, Eric Pauly, with our usual cast of characters. We have Suma, Judah, and TA of CleveAnalytics.com, breaking down some key takeaways from Week 10, discussing some future markets, talking about some opening odds for Week 11, and then, of course, ending off with Monday Night Football. Shout out to all the people who are in the comments, and shout out to everybody who is a constant viewer. Make sure you hit that like button. And all new viewers of the show, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel to make sure you never miss out. Before we get into some key takeaways from Week 10, we have to give a major shout out to Judah, who cashed a big time on a DFS contest this past weekend. And actually is going to be doing an entire breakdown of his decision-making process over on the Circles Off YouTube channel, of course, affiliated with the Hammer Betting Network. That's at Circles Off HQ on YouTube. So stay tuned for that. But Judah, congratulations. Give us a little flex that you deserve. And again, there'll be more details on that full video of your decision-making process, etc. But talk to us now. How does it feel? And congratulations.
Yeah, no flex. Better to be lucky than good. Obviously requires a ton of luck, and I ran extremely lucky there. But yeah, it's certainly something that I have dreamt of for a long time. It almost feels different. Like, obviously the money's great, but I came into this space way too young. Playing DFS and I dreamed, really did so many hours as a teenager of winning this, and to actually do it is pretty surreal. But yeah, no better way to celebrate than to talk ball.
Yeah, no, that's what you said in the chat, and that's great. I love that mentality. Obviously, you can say you've been grinding this forever. Now let's talk a little bit of ball and some of the processes that you use to make the lineup are things you talk about here, and also you write about, and you can follow Judah on Twitter at Throw the Damn Ball, and make sure you check out his content because he always writes about some of these tail outcomes he looks for. He, of course, talks about it here on Forward Progress. And again, at Circles Off HQ, he will be doing on YouTube, he'll be doing a little video breaking down this big DFS winner. So again, congrats to you, Judah. Let's talk some ball. And we're going to start with you, Judah. The Kansas City Chiefs. We're talking about Mike Tomlin Voodoo on this channel forever. And now we got some Andy Reid, Patrick Mahomes Voodoo as they sneak away a victory against the Denver Broncos, blocking that field goal to solidify a win and maintain their unbeaten record. Now, there's a lot of talk about whether or not there's going to be regression with the Chiefs in these one-score games. How can they continue to win? When you have the great equalizer at quarterback, maybe there won't be that regression because you have a team that knows how to win and win ugly and win on the biggest stages in the National Football League. So, Judah, talk to me about this Kansas City Chiefs voodoo.
Yeah, I mean, I think the concept of regression just completely misses the boat with the Chiefs, right? Regression is like taking a big set of data and saying that things are going to eventually converge to the norm. And while that might be directionally true, nothing is normal about Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs. Patrick Mahomes is probably the greatest quarterback we've ever seen, at least through however many years he's been in the league. What is it, 7-8 years now? He does not follow the normal distribution of a curve because he is an outlier. That is by definition what makes him so good. Now, that isn't to say that we should just continue to expect him to win every single game. That's obviously unreasonable, but the regular rules also I don't think apply as well. And the points about one-score games is again, it's the same thing of we should expect that the Chiefs are going to outperform the baseline because they have someone who is unlike any other baseline. And I also even think the Chiefs are operating their offense so differently, and this is perhaps a little bit too anecdotal, but even if you just watch how they operate their offense, it's almost like they hold back until the games really are in hand, or excuse me, the plays need to come for them to be in hand, or just late in the season as they kind of get to the playoffs. They almost hold back a little bit until things really matter. All that is to say, the Chiefs are going to put themselves in better situations to align themselves to be lucky more often than not. They don't follow the general rules of teams. And yes, it was obviously lucky that they won that game off of a blocked field goal. But for the most part, the Chiefs are going to set themselves up for better luck and better situations in things that tend to regress because the Chiefs aren't an outlier. That is what makes them unique, and that's what makes Patrick Mahomes unique. They don't follow the regular rules of regression.
That's very interesting because obviously regression is huge in statistics, sports betting, all correlated. But when you have the great equalizer at under center, some of those things are thrown out of the window. Tia, do you agree with Judah that there's these things that, obviously you expect these regression, other things to happen, but Mahomes and just who he is as a player, just makes that not really a factor for the Chiefs? And what else did you notice about this KC Voodoo? Because it's not like it was just last week. It's been kind of all season long with them winning these really close games. And whenever they are in close games, Mahomes always finds a way to pull out a win.
Yeah, so 15 straight wins going back to last year, only 3 by more than 8 points, which is just incredible. They've only led in 8 of those 15 games at halftime. So, it's pretty remarkable. But like Judah said, like the normal rules don't apply here, and it's not luck. I mean, you've got one of the best offensive minds of all time, and Andy Reid. You've got one of the best DCs who knows like when to dial up specific plays on defense, Spagnuolo, and you got maybe the best quarterback of all time. Like they're going to make the right plays. Even the special teams, the blocked kick yesterday, like that stuff doesn't happen to them on the other side because they've got Butker who just never misses in the clutch, and so. Those sort of things will, it's not going to always win, but you've got a higher probability when you're just so buttoned up at the right spot. So, I mean, the Chiefs are just, they break all the rules, and that's why this line, I'm sure we'll talk about it with Buffalo. He's back to being an underdog, and that's all you're going to hear for the whole week about fading Mahomes as a dog. And I think that's the point is he and this team. I don't know if they saved the good plays for the big games, but they certainly put the full effort in when they need it. So that's just who they are. And like, I don't think they're going to go 17-0 this year, but I do think they're clearly, in line to make another run.
Certainly. The Chiefs, of course, are undefeated as it stands. Major meeting with the Buffalo Bills. We will be discussing that later, so stay tuned. Suma, you have some thoughts about the KC Voodoo. Chime in.
Yeah, when we talk about regression, we are, I think, always assuming that this current baseline is going to be the baseline going forward. But in particular, when we look at the Chiefs, there might be a decent chance that they don't play too many one-score games going forward. They rank second in success rate on offense, but they only rank 10th in EPA per play, 0.074 EPA per play. That's right behind Atlanta. So they had a lot of issues generating explosive plays this season. They are success rating everyone to death, but they really could not get too many explosives. And that's also sometimes a drive killer because you cannot always every drive success rating and finishing with a touchdown. So DeAndre Hopkins looks pretty solid so far. He will get more into rhythm with Patrick Mahomes. Maybe we get a little bit more out of Xavier Worthy. Juju Smith-Schuster is very decent in this offense. So when it's all clicking in the near future a little bit more, there might be a chance that this Chiefs is going to be more explosive on offense. And that might lead to them being in more advantageous situations and maybe not playing too many close games going forward.
Very, very well said. And very funny comment from Patrick in the chat saying EPA would be bumped if Worthy could figure out how to keep his feet in bounds. A couple of times already this season, him and Mahomes have been very, very close on connecting to big plays, but have missed out. And, of course, Isaiah Pacheco is set to come back in the near future as well. So adding some more explosiveness to this Kansas City Chiefs offense. But now, unfortunately, we have to talk about the lack of explosion for the New York Jets. Huge game for them on Sunday where they were thinking, oh, maybe the Jets could be back. They just need to string together some wins. And they go into Arizona and lay an absolute egg, scoring just 6 points on offense, losing 31-6. Suma, as the resident Jets fan on this show, talk to us about the New York Jets, who currently sit 10th in the draft. And, of course, again, we have the irrational Jets fans that I know. I'm a New Yorker, so I hear them all the time. I see them all the time, trying to make excuses for how they can potentially still make a run at this thing. But just talk to us about the dumpster fire that is the New York Jets.
Yeah, I think it's pretty much over. I think it would take a miracle for them to turn the season around and run the table, as Rogers likes to say. I mean, the upcoming schedule is, mixed. You have decent teams in the Dolphins, Rams, Bills, and also winnable games against the Colts, Jaguars, Seahawks, not even sure about. So I think it's over at this point. The theory going into the season was that there's certainly going to be an upgrade from the quarterback mess last season, where where the Jets basically were the worst passing offense in the game. So we thought that's going to be an upgrade. We don't know by how much, but if Rodgers can be somewhat around an average starting quarterback in this league, with Garrett Wilson, with Mike Williams coming back, with Brees Hall, with an improved O-line, and that defense, that should be enough to make the playoffs. But now this Jets offense is not good at all. It's all Rodgers running his favorite plays where teams are really finding answers against. And the defense is not really what we thought going into the season. Even I think most of us did not expect them to be a top 3 unit by default, because there were some potential regression factors. Their defensive line was not the same as last year. They could have had injuries, but still, this defense is really not the iteration of 2022 and 2023. They're not good against the run. I think since Robert Saleh got fired, I feel like they have been playing worse. Don't know exactly what it is. So that is extremely subjective, but we saw it some plays yesterday. Sauce Gardner has Trey McBride on a 3rd down stop, and he cannot bring him down. I feel like these kind of plays have not been there last year. So without a good defense, this offense is just not good enough to compensate it. And every time they are going to face a decent offense in the near future, I think the Jets will have a very hard time winning those games.
And funny comment by Cottage in the chat, Rodgers might be the worst offensive coordinator in football. And considering he only completed 2 passes that traveled over 7 yards downfield this past week, with the longest reception being a Brees Hall 15-yard reception. Kosh, I think you're onto something. But
real quick, by the way, Suma said since Robert Saleh got fired, they're dead last in EPA per play in defense.
Oh wow!
If you could believe that. I mean, that's a mighty fall. That's a mighty fall. So there's clearly something there.
There's clearly something there, and I'm glad you mentioned that, T.A., because Judah, you have something to say as well. So come on, let's keep piling on the Jets.
I thought it was just interesting how the Cardinals attacked the Jets. The Jets had faced like the deepest depth of target of any team in the NFL, the highest deep percentage of any team. It was like 19% of passes against them were going 20 yards downfield. They were allowing like a 10 ADOT. The Cardinals basically got rid of the ball in 2.3 seconds, effectively mitigating the pass rush. And the Jets could not tackle. I mean, there's been a lot of criticism of Sauce Gardner and his inability to tackle. That was on full display on Trey McBride's like 30-yard catch. But this is a Cardinals team that averaged 8 yards after the catch. They were throwing out like a 5 ADOT. I wonder if teams are going to start attacking this Jets defense this way, basically just kind of relying on after the catch and the Jets' inability to tackle. This was just a completely new way of beating the Jets and attacking the Jets, and clearly they showed their vulnerabilities. It could just be a one-game sample, but certainly something to monitor going forward.
Definitely something to monitor for a New York Jets team that can kiss their Super Bowl hopes goodbye. But let's give the Arizona Cardinals a little bit of credit. We discussed last week, and this was also a topic of discussion on the Best Bet show that you should definitely make sure you subscribe for. That comes out every Wednesday at 3 p.m. live on the channel right here on Forward Progress, so make sure you subscribe. But we discussed whether or not Arizona's for real. There was mixed opinions on how good they are, how good they could have been, how good they've been playing. It's kind of undeniable, especially considering the lack of overall talent, especially on the defensive side of the roster. But Tia, I know you're very in tune with Arizona. You were definitely making a case for them a little bit last week. Then, of course, they do this to this New York Jets team that, of course, we had higher hopes for them to at least make that game competitive as favorites, but they lose that game outright in major fashion. But Tia, let's go back to Arizona. Now, at this point, is it safe to say they are for real? And if so, or if not, either way, how are they doing it? How are they succeeding with this roster right now?
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, I wasn't actually on them last week. I thought the line moved from, I think they were -1 and moved to 2-point dogs. I forgot if it closed at 2.5, but, the Jets got the money. I actually thought that was right, just because, for New York coming off of the extra rest, the win against Houston, you thought that, maybe their season was kind of survived and their offense was starting to gel. And, they had faced the toughest schedule of opposing pass defenses. And now they were facing an Arizona defense, which does not have the same talent as some of the groups they had faced prior. So I thought maybe that was an opportunity for them to, to carve up this defense. And Arizona just I don't know if, like I said, I don't know if it's coaching or whatnot, but they were just so aggressive on both offensive, defensive lines. They were jamming the receivers outside with guys that you just never heard of. And it did confuse Rodgers. I mean, that's what their defensive coordinator is, Nick Rallis, who's like 32 years old. He's like the youngest DC that we've seen. And they've got a really interesting, they mix up their defensive strategies. They, blitz from all different directions. It's kind of like a Brian Flores light, if you will, from a, it's really hard to pinpoint exactly where they're coming from their blitzes and the different style of defense. So you can't really game plan for them because they're very game plan agnostic. It depends on who their opponent is. So from that perspective, and he's only, again, he's a young 30s. He doesn't have a track record to really go back and study. So this is fairly new for a lot of these offensive coaches. So, it is difficult to game plan for them. But they're just a hungry team. A lot of guys who don't have big contracts, and that stuff can matter from an effort perspective, and they're playing hard for them. So there's really, for me, it's not much more than just the coaches are coaching them up and the players are playing hard and they're executing. It's the entire defensive front is all backups right now. It's their first round pick. Darius Robinson hasn't even seen the field yet. The rest of their defensive line is out for the season with injuries. So I don't know how they're doing it, but you got to give them credit. So we'll see. Maybe eventually it will come crashing down, but their schedule is so, manageable the rest of the way. They've got New England and Carolina amongst their final handful of games. So they are in position to make the playoffs, whether, they've got a real shot to win the NFC or not. I highly doubt it, but just getting in, I think is a big stepping stone for going forward.
Certainly. This was a team that did have some high expectations coming into this year, considering, the first year of Murray being fully healthy. We've seen how Kyler did really well when he came back last year. That had some optimism. A lot of us were also cautiously optimistic, considering the lack of talent on the roster in general, to see if this team can make such a big leap, especially in such a good division. And through 10 weeks, 6-4, have to tip your cap to the players and, of course, coaches and everything going on in Arizona. And let's see how the rest of the season goes on. But the Houston Texans, now they went into halftime last night with a 23-7 lead, and they lose the football game 26-23 after letting up 19 unanswered points to the Detroit Lions on Sunday Night Football. Houston missed a key field goal. It was a deep one. I think it was a 58, maybe 59-yarder that would have hopefully given them the lead there. But then the Lions were able to come down after that missed kick, get a cheeky little field goal that just snuck in there of their own to pull away for that win. But we know Houston, they've been struggling without Stephon Diggs and, of course, Nico Collins. Nico, of course, out again. Suma, talk to us about the Texans, considering we've seen them look very good at times, very poor at times, but we know that this offense can explode. We obviously know what they were able to do last year with C.J. Stroud. Are they just Nico Collins being healthy away from being real contenders again as they fall to 6-4, or are the issues in this team more deeply rooted?
I think it's both. So on the one hand side, when you look at these splits with and without Nico Collins, there's obviously a major difference, but that was also with Stephon Diggs, for example. Tank Dell had some injury trouble during the season, so there are some confounding factors, but overall, this offense has the same issues over and over again, and it was the same yesterday. The Texans yesterday had the second worst success rate of all teams, 32.4% success rate. On first and second down, a 30% success rate. I think it was the lowest of the week. 3.3 yards per play on early downs with what is supposed to be one of the best young quarterbacks. So there has to be some deeper issues. Play calling, I also don't think that we should give CJ Stroud a pass all the time, because he also had a few very bad throws. Then he also had a few highlight throws on like third down. But that's basically the Houston Texans offense this season. Terrible on early downs, can't move the ball, and then CJ Stroud give us some hope on longer down distances on third down. And I'm not sure that Nico Collins alone is the solution to this problem, because if you cannot move the ball on early downs, it will also be very tough to always hit Nico Collins on third down. So remains to be seen. And another point that is very consistent, I think TA talked about it a few times already. D'Amico Ryans is not good when it comes to game management. He might be a phenomenal DC, but game management, no bueno. I mean, yesterday, 4th and 4 from the Detroit Lions, 40-yard line, 58-yard field goal, or try to get a new set of downs with CJ Stroud and potentially try to end this game. I mean, even if you hit this field goal, you are leaving the Detroit Lions with, I think, 2 minutes and 2 timeouts. Correct me if I'm wrong. So should have gone for it. And yeah, that's a common theme with the Texans. I think they are a very good or decent playoff team when they are healthy, but D'Amico Ryans and that early down efficiency might hold them back this season.
We've talked about this for 10 weeks now about D'Amico Ryans and Bobby Slowik and their early down inefficiencies on offense. And that's something that I know from just listening to you guys and reading up on some of the work TA does as well last season, that they changed that philosophy toward the end of last year, which is when we saw CJ Stroud really break out. And I think a lot of us expected that they were going to maintain that end of year success to bring it into this year. But instead, they've reverted back to what hasn't worked, and they are sticking with what isn't working. And it also just pairs well with the comment that Patrick made earlier that why is there such a dearth of quality coaching in the National Football League? I said this last week, and again, maybe we could spend a show on this in the offseason or a later date, how some people are just OCs and DCs and don't need to make that step to be an HC, and maybe the league can adjust and go in that direction. But that's a time to take a little bit look at that a little bit later. But definitely some things to note about the Houston Texans. And like you said, they look like a quality playoff team, but the Super Bowl buzz that they were getting early in the season, definitely not as warranted currently. We're going to definitely take a look at some futures. I see E-Colt will be going to that later, but we have one more takeaway from this week before we get into futures, week 10, and of course, week 11, and of course, Monday Night Football. Let's talk about Russell Wilson and the Washington Commanders. Russell Wilson ends up with 3 touchdown passes, $195, and the Steelers get a controversial win against my Commanders as it's a $1 billion organization, yet we're not even taking out I didn't even see an index card yesterday for that final play to bring out the change. That pissed me off. They didn't get the index card. But we'll focus more on Russell Wilson and the Steelers, who of course pull off another win. Tomlin off the bye, getting that victory. That seems to be the case. Can Russell Wilson sustain his play, Judah? Because there's so much downfield throws, or let me phrase it this way. There are so many plays that look to be like inefficient, and like he is still a great deep ball thrower. I guess nobody can argue that. But we already saw it in that game when they weren't connecting on those deep balls. They had trouble moving a little bit. What they were, it obviously looked beautiful, and they were able to sustain some drives. So, Judah, considering how Russ has played in his Steelers tenure so far, can Russ sustain this play and keep Pittsburgh where they are atop the AFC North?
Yeah, I think that's exactly the question, where if you look at Russell Wilson's kind of statistical profile, whether it's like his pressure to sack rate, his scramble rates, and like basically any of his metrics, it's roughly the same as it's been the last 3 years. The only difference is that the EPA he's earned on deep passes is way, way higher than it's been in any of the seasons. And maybe that's like directionally accurate. But right now, Russell Wilson is getting 1.43 on average expected points added per deep pass, which, and I have the data of this for the last 6 seasons. He's first in the NFL by a mile. The next closest is Tua Tagovailoa is 2022. He's at 1.2 EPA per play. CJ Stroud last year is at 1.21. So even if Russell Wilson is, and I'm willing to believe that he like can lead a good deep offense, there I think is going to be some sort of regression. He's taking sacks at the same rate. He can't scramble like he used to. His scramble rate is way down, and when he does scramble, he's very rarely running. I think that just the level of play is a little bit unsustainable. It might be volatile week to week, but there's nothing that I think has changed dramatically in his style of play that would lead me to believe that the last 3 years are kind of just like noise and the real signal is what we've seen for 3 games this year. I think a lot of his kind of weaknesses are being propagated by an ability to hit on these deep balls that I don't think is going to be able to sustain itself, at least not to this degree.
Yeah, certainly. And like I mentioned earlier, just from watching the game, didn't break into the big stats as a Commander fan. Of course, I had that game volume on big screen. When he was throwing those deep balls and Washington was not around them, of course, they made those connections. Yeah, they could move the ball, but there was a lot of plays that he tried to hit some deep balls. Washington covered them pretty well. And it also took an amazing George Pickens catch that Ecolt mentions in the end zone. Like, that was an amazing catch. Of course, big-time players will make big-time plays at some points, but hard to say that 50-50 balls, of course, when they're probably not even 50-50 at some point, probably less of a chance of having a completion percentage going your way more often than not. That's something I think that we can agree on is where regression will settle in, especially against teams that do have better secondaries than the Washington Commanders. That's going to wrap up for Week 10 breakdowns. Let's discuss some futures, some Week 11, and some Monday Night Football. Before we get into that, we have to shout out our sponsor, Fanduel Sportsbook. Kick off this NFL season with a win on Fanduel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, all customers get a profit boost every single NFL game day. That means you can pump up your gridiron winnings multiple times a week. Today, Monday Night Football, same game parlay profit boost token for the Rams-Dolphins game. FanDuel has a ton of ways for you to get in on the NFL action. You can bet on money lines, spreads, player props, and more. Plus, with super simple live betting, lightning fast bet settlement, and instant withdrawals, FanDuel makes betting on the NFL easier than ever before. Just visit fanduel.com/forwardprogress to download FanDuel today. Must be 21 plus and present in select states or 18 plus and present in DC. Opt-in required. Bonus issued as non-withdrawable profit boost tokens. Restrictions apply, including token expiration. See terms for both offers at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit fanduel.com/RG. Call 1-888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org/chat in Connecticut or visit mdgamblinghelp.org in Maryland. Hope is here. Visit gamblinghelplinema.org or call 800-327-5050 for 24/7 support in Massachusetts, or call 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY in New York. All right, guys, let's talk about some future markets. Judah, you just mentioned something in the chat that I'm very curious to discuss. Tonight, we see the Los Angeles Rams play against Miami Dolphins. Of course, we already mentioned the Arizona Cardinals now, the NFC West leading Arizona Cardinals. But you're looking further than just the NFC West for the Los Angeles Rams. You think the Rams have a pulse for the entire NFC? So talk to us about your thought process on maybe the the Rams winning the NFC.
Yeah, I'll first talk about my hesitations before I actually get into the case for it. I think for betting, the markets like conference championship or Super Bowl seeding matters so much. And the Rams certainly have an uphill battle to win the NFC West and get a top seed in their schedule is very difficult. That's kind of on the one hand. But on the other hand, the other thing I want to be looking for in futures is teams whose ceilings are not like top 10, but top 5, and who, if everything breaks right for them, they actually have the ability to compete for a Super Bowl. And I think where there's value here is that, number one, the Rams have been hurt for a better part of the last 2 years, and on-off splits, generally noisy, kind of similar to what we're talking about with Patrick Mahomes earlier, that these things like regression tend to work in most cases, but they don't always work on kind of outlier scenarios. And I think it's impossible to ignore the on-off splits of the Rams offense when they have all of Kupp, Nakua, Williams, and Stafford healthy. Over the last 2 years, this is an offense that's averaging 7.5 yards per play. The Niners are the next closest at 6.4. They've got like a 53% success rate, a 0.3 EPA per play. Outrageous numbers, by far the best offense in the NFL. And even if that's not going to sustain itself, we also have like a decent sample of this. It's like 8 or 9 games worth of plays. It's not nothing. This offense can absolutely be elite. And if all those guys are healthy, again, that's not a given. But it is the sort of ceiling that we're chasing when we're betting on these 30-1s. They can win any game. And on the defensive side of the ball, Jared Verse is really emerging as not just a great rookie, but one of the dominant edge players in the NFL. He's right up there with, if you're kind of looking at a bunch of pass rush efficiency metrics, he's right up there with Myles Garrett. He's right up there with Micah Parsons. He's right up there with the very best in the NFL, and that changes the entire complexion of your defense. They've been a little bit vulnerable to explosive plays, but from an EPA standpoint, they've been like top 5 over the last month. Similar numbers from the success rate side of things. This is a defense that I think can be average, and certainly if Jared Verse continues to take this next step, this is a guy who can put a defense on his back. Add that all up, they have some ceiling. The path is certainly difficult, but that's why we're getting 30-1 here. And I wish they had an easier schedule and a better shot at some of the seeding here, but it is still, I think, a worthwhile bet to consider given the odds.
Definitely a great point there for the Los Angeles Rams. And of course, they play tonight. So if they get this win tonight, you're probably going to see those odds dip a little bit. So if you like what you heard from Judah, now is probably the best time to get into it. But Patrick in the comments made a great remark about the Coach of the Year and the MVP markets being the most interesting. I'm very interested in the Coach of the Year market as well. I have some exposure, and also I know, TA, that you have some exposure as well on KOC and maybe another candidate there. But as you can see, Dan Quinn of the Commanders leading the way. Dan Campbell, 5-1 with the NFC leading Lions. Mike Tomlin, of course, getting some love in Pittsburgh with the 7-2 Steelers. Obviously, some of these names have shifted a lot. Kevin O'Connell was really high out the gate, but as the team has lost a little bit, his odds have dropped, understandably so. John Gannon's odds increasing as well as the Cardinals have done this run. But Tia, I know there's a pretty set criteria per se, as this is a award that's voted on that you've mentioned numerous times and you write about in every single year in your previews. Considering these odds now and some of these guys that don't necessarily fit that criteria, but some guys that do, are you still confident, I guess I'd say, in your KOC Coach of the Year ticket? Is there anybody you're looking to add to a portfolio now, or how are you viewing the market as it stands?
Yeah, if you could pull up the odds, just so I could take a look. But this is as deep of a Coach of the Year market, I think, as I've seen at this point, because, like you said, it's historically it's not the coach on the best team award like some people have discussed in the past. It's really the biggest overachiever award, and so there are like a set of criteria that historically, generally there are outliers, but generally has kind of fallen into, a team that's not favored to make the playoffs. I think essentially every winner in like the last 25 years has come in with a win total in single digits. It's not like a double digit win total team. And then it's, you've got to improve by at least 4 or 5 games and typically you do have to make the playoffs. So it's like all those kind of it filters out a lot of names and kind of leads to a couple at the top. But this year it's different because you've got Dan Campbell and obviously Andy Reid that might win 15, 16 games. And at that point, you really have to consider them just because that is essentially an outlier. And then you got Mike Tomlin doing his thing with Pittsburgh. I do think Pittsburgh eventually will, as they face a tougher schedule here with 2 games versus Baltimore and Cincinnati, and one of the toughest schedules in the NFL, they probably are going to fall off a bit. So they'll make the playoffs, but, they really have to exceed expectations, win that division for him to have a shot. And then, Dan Quinn's leading, although honestly, based on the fact that Newton went off sides on that 4th and 1, that alone should disqualify him, in my opinion. Kind of half kidding, but like that's a pure coaching, teaching. I mean, there is no way that anybody thought that they were going to snap the ball there. So he should have told that entire defense, like, do not flinch, don't even try and move. But half kidding, I do think they've got, they got the Eagles this week. They're underdogs. If they lose that one, he's going to fall back. And I do think that it's really Jaden Daniels who's going to get all of that credit there. So I don't find him that attractive as the leader. So, I mean, KOC, Minnesota is falling back a little bit, but they keep winning and they've got a very soft schedule the rest of the way. So if they can they may not win the division, but if they can get to 11 wins, he's going to have a clear case as a team with a win total at 6.5 coming into the year. And Sam Darnold as your quarterback kind of winning in spite of him. So he'll get, a good chunk of the credit. We talked about Arizona, and Jonathan Gannon is a guy that I'm going to look to maybe sprinkle on as well. Because if they win the NFC West, he's going to be up there. So it's a long-winded way of saying there are a bunch of good candidates, but I would really concentrate on, someone like Gannon. And like I said, I still think KOC has a viable case. I don't think Dan Campbell's going to win it. Just because he could have won it last year based on the leap they made, and I just don't think they'll have that outlier of a season to get there. And I think Andy Reid could have a case, but Patrick Mahomes probably wins MVP if they go undefeated, or almost certainly would, which might dilute Andy Reid a little bit. So I would probably concentrate on KOC and Gannon and guys like that who have maybe overachieved the most.
Certainly, it's something that, again, that you write about and post often. Definitely check out TA's work at cleveanalytics.com, where he discusses some of these criteria and, of course, our outliers and everything. But when you have people voting on things and you do have a pretty solid sample size of what people vote for, like TA mentioned, it's been more of an overachieving coach award rather than the coach of the best team. award. So definitely something to take a look at. And Patrick and How.D making some two good points in the comments, talking about Flores and this defense obviously deserving credit, but also how much credit should KOC get if the defense is better than the offense. But like TA mentioned, they're winning now at this point in spite of Sam Darnold with some of these plays. And of course, you can then point back to the defense, how they're holding teams to such low success rates and doing a great job there. So it's definitely a great look. And nobody should be betting Eberflus 400-1 anything unless somebody glitched him 400-1 to get fired. Then sure, you can look at those markets. But it's a funny one there.
Let me do a quick rebuttal, because those are fair points about Flores.
Mm-hmm.
But look at Kevin Stefanski last year. I mean, he's an offensive coach, and that was one of the worst offenses in the NFL. And he had 4 quarterbacks that started games, and he won it. So I mean, you could have made the case, that was Jim Schwartz and that elite defense that won him those games. So it's something that it is a fair point to at least discuss. But the offense is still top 12 to 15 in the league when you look at EPA, and they're still scoring points. It's not. I mean, yesterday obviously was an aberration. It's still a good offense. This isn't the 85 Bears here where it's all defense and nothing on offense. So, let's let the season play out. But I think KOC is going to get credit for taking a guy like Darnold, who we're starting to see all his warts, and they're winning in spite of that. I do think he does get some credit there. So, like I said, there's plenty of cases to be made for a lot of guys. So I wouldn't fault anybody for taking some stabs here. But I definitely think he'll be in the mix if they win 11 games.
Certainly well said. I'm sure that was realistically the handicap in the beginning of the season as well. Of course, there's going to be competition throughout the season. It was never going to be a one-man race, considering the turnover on teams, the NFL's propensity to have teams that exceed expectations, especially at a high level. That's the nature of the sport. So very interesting market indeed. So glad to get perspective in the comments and, of course, from everybody here. But, gentlemen, let's move on to week 11 and discuss some opening odds for this upcoming week. We're going to start with, of course, the marquee game of the week, the Buffalo Bills versus the Kansas City Chiefs. Right now on Fanduel Sportsbook, the Buffalo Bills are 1.5 point home favorites, total sitting 45.5. You're going to have that meme graphic of like one side of the tail of a bell curve being like Mahomes is the underdog, the other side, mentioning all these other things about why they should be underdogs, then the final side being Mahomes is the underdog. That's personally my take, but we want to get some better content out there, of course. So, Suma, talk to us about some things that are more important than just Mahomes as a dog, such as injuries, etc., and how you view or how you expect, this line to move by kickoff in this KC Buff game.
I still have to do it because it's still funny. Patrick Mahomes as an underdog in his career, 12-3 straight up, 13-1-1 against the spread. Just for reference here. So we don't know whether he will actually close as a dog. So we'll see later in the week. But right now, as him being the dog, those are the trends. I don't make them. Buffalo, no Amari Cooper, maybe. He has a wrist injury. He could not throw last week in practice. So I'm not 100% sure whether he can be back. Ken Coleman, also wrist injury, was inactive. Dalton Kincaid left with a knee injury. I think his status is in doubt. So I think the Bills have shown us several times this season that injuries to their playmakers might not matter too much, but maybe it might matter against a very good Chiefs defense. So right now it's very interesting to see KC as dogs. I think there's a good case to be made that Buffalo are also a juggernaut on offense. They have a decent defense. They are at home. So I can definitely see why there's going to be some early money on the Bills. But I would also not be surprised if we saw Chiefs money at some point. It's a dynamic market. We might see a few flip-flops actually, depending on how things shake up on the injury front. So yeah, great game. Can't wait.
Cannot wait for that 4:25 on Sunday. Jude, I'm going to go to you on this one quickly. If you don't have any thoughts, that is more than okay. But just, I guess, from a power ratings perspective, do you agree with this initial number? And then, obviously, I'm sure you adjust those numbers based on what is actually happening, injuries, travel, etc. But do you agree with this opening number from a market perspective? And then how do you expect this to go? Do you agree with Suma that you're going to see two-way action here?
Yeah, I don't know about the action. This is certainly not my area of expertise. I think that I would like lean if we are saying that around 1.5 for home fields, implying these two teams are neutral. I still think there's an edge to the Bills, at least given what we know from the past couple of weeks, and especially in considering some of the matchup factors at play here. With the exception of they gave up an 80-yard rush to Jonathan Taylor, but the Bills' run defense has been really stout against the run, and we talk about Kansas City's success rate. That's somehow this year, that's a function of their ability to run the ball. The defense also lost a couple of key pieces. Their secondary depth has, Josh Williams going down was a huge injury. Their replacements have not been as good. I think this is a far different test on the Bill side of things, but also Patrick Mahomes is a dog. That's what it's going to come down to. So no bet for me, and obviously the injury news is going to be key, but I do think from a fundamentals perspective, if we're saying that the Bills and Chiefs are about even on a neutral, I'm not sure I agree with that. I give a slight edge to the Bills.
Understood. Tia, any final thoughts on Buffalo KC?
Yeah, I why waste our time trying to pick who's going to win? Just tease Kansas City up. Like that to me is the most logical thing. Not only obviously, with those ATS numbers, this is pretty obvious, but as an underdog, Patrick Mahomes has never not covered a teaser. So that's an easy one. But to me, it's like you get them, at 8.5 here. You could, depending on what happens, you could look at some other games obviously next week, but you could actually look at Miami potentially as a teaser leg as well if you wanted to tease them up. But I just think like in these sort of situations, I did the same thing when they played San Francisco. It's like why fight over which side of the coin you want here. Like, if they're not going to cover, it's probably going to be a tight game anyway. So whether they win or lose, just, toss them in a teaser leg if you want. So that's the way I look at it. I just think, I don't think Buffalo is explosive enough to really, maybe I'm knock on wood here. I don't think they're explosive enough to really blow out a good defense, a good team like Kansas City necessarily, like they might have in the past. But, I think that these teams know each other so well that there's not going to be many surprises, and it should just be another tight game. So that's essentially my look, is just finding another teaser leg to pair with Kansas City this week.
Certainly a great way to go about it. Connor in the chat saying there's nothing more important than Mahomes as a dog. And Connor, I'm with you there, brother. I 100% agree. We got two more games to discuss before we talk Monday Night Football, and both of them are huge for the kings of their respective divisions. And let's start with Pittsburgh and Baltimore. Right now, looking at FanDuel Sportsbook, the Pittsburgh Steelers are 3.5-point home underdogs to the Ravens. Total 47.5. Ti, just going to go right back to you. First initial thoughts on this market between the Ravens and Steelers in a huge game for the AFC North.
Man, the amount of money I keep losing on baiting Tomlin as an underdog, I just refuse to do it anymore. I'd love to take, Baltimore when it was at 3, but I don't know. There is something to it. There's definitely a signal here with Tomlin in these situations that I just don't want to mess with at this point. So I do think Baltimore, whenever you look at any of these Baltimore games, I was on here last week talking about how that Thursday night game was going to be a shootout and a ton of points. And I think we can see it again. Pittsburgh is an over team now with Russell Wilson, especially with the propensity to hit chunk plays down the field. And if Kyle Hamilton, could miss this game, that opens things up even more. This Ravens secondary is pretty bad generally, but then without Kyle Hamilton, that's a chess piece you cannot replace. So, I might look at the over here. I think it was sitting right at 47. My numbers have it closer to 50, but it's always tough with a rivalry game, and have to check weather and all those sorts of things. But I do think this, with Alex Highsmith out too for Pittsburgh, less of a pass rush. I do think, just Baltimore is just an over team, and frankly, Pittsburgh is now too. And I think Jaden Daniels showed, you can move the ball in this team. It's not impossible. So that's the way I would be looking, is just another over at kind of 47 is a key number. So that's where I would go.
Definitely understood. Another one from Kaj in the chat talking about the Mike Tomlin Voodoo. Suma, I know you're a fan or hate, depending on what side of the coin you're on, depending on what you bet in the Steelers, but I know you have your familiarity with the Tomlin Voodoo. Any comments on what you're expecting in this one? Obviously, that's a little bit of a joke, but initial market, Suma, Steelers, Ravens. What are your thoughts?
No matter at which number you take the Ravens here, you are going to sweat the Tomlin Voodoo all Sunday long. I mean, I think my record against the Steelers is the worst over the past couple of years. So pretty rough. I agree with TA. Always a decent look at the current market price. Ravens have a very strong run defense, so it will be interesting to see whether Arthur Smith maybe still goes play action heavy and maybe does not run the ball as much. Maybe just use the looks from the past 3 games to set up play action. But that would be my only rebuttal, that the Arthur Smith offense might not work as much against a very, very good run defense. They were not great at running the ball yesterday, but I think they want to run the ball often, and they need their 3, 4, 5 yards a pop at least to make things easier for them, and maybe also from a mental aspect to call more of the good play action stuff.
Very, very, very well said there. Understood. Patrick with a good comment. I don't know. At this team, maybe we should admit the Steelers are just a good team. Jude, I know we talked a little about Russell Wilson at the top of the show. Good segue into this comment and as well as this matchup. Judah, do you have any thoughts on this opening market? And also, are you willing to admit the Steelers are a good team at this point?
I think the Steelers are definitely a better version of the Steelers from what we've seen the past bunch of years when they somehow snuck into the playoffs. Then I don't think you can bet, at least I personally cannot bet kind of a mainline spread here. I think they're an extremely volatile team, especially with how good the Ravens offense is. I think it's certainly a vulnerable pass defense, but this game just screams volatility to me, screams alt lines, and there's just far too much uncertainty about how good Russell Wilson actually is. I laid out the case earlier for some regression and why perhaps his level play is unsustainable. I don't think you can bet. At least I certainly won't be betting any of the main lines.
Totally understood. Definitely can just see how he fares again in his 4th start as the starter, and then of course against his poor pass defense. So maybe this isn't the week where Russ comes back down to earth, considering the matchup. But I guess we'll find out. And Kai's mentioning expecting sunny and warm in Pittsburgh. So if you get the total at 47, of course, is a key number. Definitely a good look according to TA's numbers. So definitely.
Well, I mean, and let's compare it. Not to interrupt. Let's compare it to when Baltimore played Denver a couple of weeks ago. I had that over. I think that was 46, and that pretty much flew over by the 3rd quarter. And Pittsburgh's, Russell Wilson's a better quarterback than Bo Nix. And I think Denver's defense might be better than Pittsburgh's. I mean, comparable. So I think, using that as a comparison, I think this number could be, you could get a little bit of a mini shootout here. So that's the way I'm looking at it.
After the offense we saw on Sunday, any shootouts for this upcoming week would be very welcome for all fans all over, considering the lack of offense this past week. But final game before we get to Monday Night Football, Thursday night, my Washington Commanders heading to Philly as 3-point underdogs, but that 3 is very juiced to the Philly side. It's 3 minus 120 at Fanduel. Total of 49.5 as you have the Commanders, who are, an offensive juggernaut with a poor defense. Unsure if Marshawn Lattimore is going to be in there. I know Washington also had an injury, a couple injuries across their offensive line. Now, of course, in a short week and a massive game for the NFC East. If Washington wins, they'll have a 0.5 game lead over Philly. And if they lose, they'll have a 2.5 game deficit against Philly. We're going to go back to you, Judah, just to kick us off here. Any thoughts on this Washington-Philly Thursday night clash?
Yeah, shocker. I think I like Washington here. This is a Eagles offense that certainly has a ton of potential running the ball and breaking some explosive plays. But Jordan Mailata they opened the practice window. I doubt he's back, but I think it would be massive for him to come back. And if not, this is a team that really has been struggling in pass protection, and Jalen Hurts is taking a ton of sacks. That is the strength of the Washington defense. And the real question, I think, is going to be, this is an Eagles defense that over the last 5 or 6 weeks is leading the league in pass EPA. They've been an absolute juggernaut. I'm not sure that matters against a quarterback like Jaden Daniels and how good this offense is. It's going to be a real test. I think that 1.5 points on a neutral probably is a little bit too much given how much better I think Washington's offense is than Philly's, but certainly going to be a great game. I'll be in attendance for this one actually, so I'm super excited to see it unfold in real time.
I'm jealous. I'm still debating finessing some tickets and making my way to Philly from New York, so maybe I'll be seeing you there, Drew. That'd be nice. We'll go to you, Suma. Early Washington Philly thoughts for Thursday Night Football. Anything on your radar just yet, or still need to see some injury news, etc.?
No strong opinion as of right now. Going to see if Commies O-line is going to be healthy. Eagles have been incredible, as Judah said, but I think their defensive metrics might also be a little bit overrated at this point. Really no strong opinion. I think early market around the 3 is probably correct.
Very nice, very nice. TA, lastly, before we get to Monday Night Football, any thoughts on this Thursday night clash at Open?
Yeah, I mean, back-to-back really good Thursday night divisional games, which I don't mind. Might just look at. I don't have yesterday's data in yet, but I've got 2.5 total of 50. So I think it's right in line. With the market. So I do think Washington does miss Brian Robinson. I think he's a very underrated aspect of that offense, that run game, especially between tackles. I mean, Austin Eckler's fine as a receiving back and, to kind of mix things up and bounce outside, but he's not really a between the tackles guy. And I think Robinson does a nice job on early downs, kind of creating some of those, some of those yardage, some of those good, nice runs, effective runs on early downs, which helps, and in short yardage. So I think they do miss that. So hopefully he can play for Washington's sake. But I do think he, matters a little bit. But this is Philly's defense playing much better. Number 1 in the NFL since like week 6. So, against a much softer schedule, obviously. So, but they did go into Cincinnati and they held Cincinnati down. So I think their defense is playing a lot better. Cooper DeJean is number 1 if you look at PFF coverage grades amongst all cornerbacks right now, which is pretty incredible for a rookie. Quinyon Mitchell's playing well. They got Slay back there, so they're solidifying the secondary. So it should be a really good game. I don't, it's hard to imagine a blowout either way. But I think the numbers are about right. And if it gets a 3.5, I think it makes Washington really interesting. But at 3, it's about right.
Certainly makes sense, of course, with 3 being such a key number, and should be a fun one. And hopefully B-Rob does play, like you said, TA. And as we mentioned on last week's show, and I think 2 shows ago as well, Washington's overall skill group isn't great, and we've seen some of those issues kind of rear its head with some drops and some plays that you'd expect teams to make. Jaden Dale's making some amazing throws, et cetera, that just aren't leading to completions and moving the chains. And again, what's there not to like? I'm going to go to this game really quick back to what happened yesterday. Like, if your rookie quarterback is literally half an inch away and arguably even got the inch you needed to potentially get a game-winning drive at home, like, yeah, you lost, but there's everything is to be happy about still. The future's looking bright. So shout out JD5, who I'm going to be rooting for on Thursday. But let's talk about Monday Night Football. Miami at Los Angeles, definitely seeing some Rams money more coming in. I saw yesterday they was really sitting more 1.5, now seeing 2.5 at Fanduel. Total 48.5 with 2 teams that certainly have high-flying offenses. We're going to start with you here, Suma. Rams, Dolphins, any thoughts on this game or something you're not really feeling too strongly about?
Market has moved a lot. I think there's some uncertainty about Tyreek Hill. Shefty said earlier today that from calling around, there seems to be optimism, and he would lean him to play. But that's just a guess. So, and when you read about the injury, it might something where he could be active, but it might get progressively worse throughout the game when he gets bumped, when he has to block, tackling, stuff like that. So I'm not sure whether Tyreek Hill, if he plays, is going to be at 100%. And I think despite the Dolphins maybe having a decent matchup against that spine of the Rams defense, Judah talked about it, the Rams defensive line is getting better and better, but I think that the line-making group and the secondary is still vulnerable. And if Tua can get the ball out quick, they should have some success, but maybe with a limited Tyreek, this should be harder to do. I like the other side a little bit more here. Rams are, for the first time this season, almost fully healthy. Rob Havenstein will be out, but they're getting both guards back, Jonah Jackson, Steve Avila. I think that their rookie center might still remain at center. Bo Limmer, he has been solid. Not sure whether they want to shake that up. But at least they have their full arsenal of weapons along the interior line back. And I think they should be able to pass protect much better and also run the ball more efficient. Dolphins defense has been decent when it comes to pass rush, but I think the Rams offense should find ways to score. Small lean for me towards the Rams at the current number.
Small lean at the current number for Suma right there. Yeah, talk to us about your thoughts on this one. I know Suma mentioned some of the injuries or positive injury news, I should say, which is obviously great for both teams. And also, Tia, you cooked up a little same-game parlay a la Judah, who also has one that we're going to get to right after. But, Tia, give us your general thoughts on this game, and let's talk about this SGP you cooked up.
Yeah, I don't have a position here. I think my guess is, the move was pretty clear, the Tyreek Hill news. I think if he's announced out, which doesn't look like, but if he's announced out, I think just goes to the flat 3 is my guess. And then if he's announced in, maybe this comes back down to 1.5, 2 is my guess, kind of a midpoint. But that's my thinking on the line move. But yeah, I think there's a good case both ways. I mean, Tua is the number 3 quarterback by EPA in the last 2 games since he's been back. Everything is short though. I mean, his air yards per attempt is the lowest in the league. It's like 5.5. And he's throwing a lot to Devin A-Chain out of the backfield, which I can talk about the SGP. He's part of that, but I think that's probably what they're just going to keep, throwing short, getting the ball out of his hands quick against the Rams, who have the number 1 pressure rate defense in the NFL, surprisingly, and they do it without blitzing, which is a positive. So I think from that perspective, I think the both teams will move it, and the fact that the Rams get both Avila and Jonah Jackson back to their offensive line, they finally have a kind of a full set of O linemen is going to be helpful. Against the Dolphins, who do get pressure as well, although against an easy schedule, Zach Seiler's back. He missed the last 2 games, and that was big because he's been getting a lot of pressure up the middle, especially quick pressure. So that will be beneficial. But I think it's a tight game. I think it's a solid game, and I don't really see an edge either way. But that's you tell me when you want to start talking about the SGP. But that's kind of my thoughts. I think it's priced about right. I mean, if Tyreek Hill is announced in and the line doesn't budge too much from here, if it stays 2.5, maybe have an interest in Miami, or even, like I said, teasing them up and sticking Kansas City next week with them could be interesting. But I would need Tyreek Hill to be in.
And Tia, I know your SGP, like you mentioned, was very just a lot around Devon Achane. So let's dive into what you were thinking with Achane, how you were targeting him or fading him.
Yeah, so I know there's a lot of the negative correlated SGPs are the most valuable. So I've got Dolphins plus 2.5, and then I paired that with Devon Achane under 5.5 receptions, but over 60 alternative receiving yards. My only thinking there is, so the Rams are, when you look at the target share that they've allowed to running backs, and I don't know if this is a scheme related thing or just teams are attacking receivers because they're bad on the outside for the most part. But they are, top 8 in terms of lowest target share to allow to running backs, but they're number 32 in terms of yards per target and EPA allowed to backfield targets. So, they're not getting a lot of catches, running backs are, but when they do, they're getting big chunks. And so I even look back anecdotally the last 4 or 5 weeks, number 1 running backs when playing the Rams have gone under the reception total, I think 3 of the last 4 weeks, but have gone over the yardage total in 3 of those 4 as well. So there is a little bit of, history here of running backs being able to get big chunks on them, even when they don't catch a lot of passes. So, and Devon Achane is one of the most explosive running backs in the NFL. So even just a swing pass or, a screen pass can get a lot of that help with the alternative yardage. I think he's seen at least 7 targets in all of Tua's starts this year. So he's been a big part of this pass game. So, I'm just banking on some of that, those big chunks on lower usage there. And then with the Raheem Mostert 40 plus alternative rush yards, that is just, again, thinking if Achane is used more in the pass game, if Tyreek Hill's out, maybe he gets split out a little bit more, and then they use Mostert more in the run game. But that is just, I think he'll have a decent amount of success. He gets between 9 and 11 carries in all of the games that he's played with HN. So it's not a huge bar, essentially talking 4 yards a carry to clear that mark. So that's essentially what I'm looking at. I think the numbers are pretty juicy, but we'll see.
I would definitely
consider an amateur at this.
I would definitely consider it 73-1 as a juicy parlay. So that's a very nice. I love that reverse correlation there, and then also adding in the other running back to get there. But Judah, let's talk about your SGP of the week, and of course your overall view of this Dolphins-Rams game. Let's see if you're going to beat 73-1 is the number to beat, and of course the guy's on fire after what he did yesterday. So if you're not on the train, definitely today's the day to hop on.
Yeah, well, we'll see if I was at 75-1 when I sent this in this morning. We'll see how it's moved stints. But I'm also going to stick with the inverse correlation. It's generally where we get most of our value here. And that's me betting on Matthew Stafford and Devon Achane as a runner. I still do think he is the primary back. He's also extremely explosive going up against a pretty extreme run funnel defense now. At least in terms of EPA per play and some other metrics. The story here is that this is a Miami defense that has struggled. The Rams are healthy on the offensive line, as was just described. They're going to pass plenty. The distribution of volume on this team is particularly interesting because they just do not give handoffs to non-Kyron Williams running backs. So even if he gets the ball, it seems like Kyron Williams is getting 23 carries a game. But still, there's plenty of passing volume. This is a team that often passes 35 to 40 times a game. Is a reason why Stafford's prop is so high, and he's got a great matchup. So, looking at Matthew Stafford, 300 yards, the Rams to win by 4.5. I think that's probably the path of least resistance for them, beating the Dolphins, who are easier to pass against than run against. Get Devon Achane, 80 yards. This is a Dolphins team which still runs the ball plenty. Even in negative game scripts. In fact, they are one of the highest run rate over expected teams in these negative game states. And then kind of interesting, I'm afraid here that we're going to lose some of our value that we had earlier today. But if we're betting on an alt over, you would expect kind of the correlation to be well priced in for Colby Parkinson to go over his receiving yards, but I don't think that's been the case. In fact, we are well above our 75 here. And this is a Dolphins team that has really struggled against tight ends. They're allowing the third most targets to tight ends. Yes, he was held in check last week, but Parkinson's gone over this number in every other game. He's got a matchup that filters to tight ends, unlike the Seahawks, which filter away from tight ends, especially if Stafford's going to. If we're already pricing in 300 yards conditional on that happening, it seems like a pretty good bet, at least relative to the market. And you saw that in real time as we were building this same game parlay for Parkinson to go over his number. So add it all up, we've got the Rams to have success via the passing game, the Dolphins to continue to run even in a negative game script and kind of taking advantage of a weak matchup against the Rams run defense. And we got 85-1.
That's the story Judah is telling for this matchup. You have Suma with a lean toward the Rams at current market. You have TA with a 73-1 parlay and Judah with an 85-1 banger right there. So let's hopefully we have a fun Monday Night Football matchup between two teams that are certainly capable of putting on a show. So we should be in for a good one. That's going to wrap it up for us. Want to remind everybody that we'll be here same time, same place next week to follow this show. Also, make sure you subscribe to the channel, like this video, and share the content. It's the best way to help us grow. And of course, we have content on this channel all week long, including, again, Best Bet Show on Wednesday, watch alongs for every primetime game, prop shows, and also Circle Back HQ. Circles Off HQ is also going to have Judah's breakdown of his huge DFS win yesterday and also other amazing pieces of gambling content. We appreciate you guys on behalf of everybody, and thank you to our sponsor, Fanduel. Best of luck with your bets. See you guys next time.